Ladies, gentlemen, pronouns, lend me your ears. Crazy Kid back for another react. This time here, we're going to take a look at this video called Why Gen X Men Became More Dangerous After 50. I've never seen this video before. It's by a channel called Psychology Unlocked. And, being a Gen X person myself, kind of makes me wonder, why they think that we're more dangerous. So without any further ado, let's get into the video. Let's find out why Gen X men are more dangerous after they reach the age of 50.
There's something that happens to a man sometime in his 50s that most people don't talk about. You start to care less about what people think of you, and somehow you become harder to manipulate. And that's what they're afraid of. Not because you've become violent or aggressive, but because you've finally figured out how to say no without explaining yourself. You've learned that silence is sometimes the most powerful response.
Yeah, and a lot of Gen X people, especially myself, we just rather not get into conflict and just basically say, hey, deal with it yourself,
And somewhere along the way, you stop needing approval from anyone. That's what they call dangerous. You've lived enough now to know the difference between what matters and what doesn't. You've been married or you haven't. You've had your heart broken or you've learned to protect it. You've lost money, lost jobs, lost people. You've been lied to. You've failed in front of people you cared about. And somehow, all of that has taught you something that no young man can understand. It's taught you how to survive. And
Our entire childhood was all about survival. You take a look at the playground equipment we had, the lack of safety regulations that were available at the time from the 70s through the 90s. The safety regulations that actually got created because of some of the stuff that we put the equipment that we had, the way that we used it, the way that, like take a look at lawn darts. Lawn darts was a perfect example. They said, oh, this will be a fun game. They gave us metal darts with sharp metal points on them and said, throw them in these circles. And we came up with a brand new game about it that wasn't in the manual.
survival, real survival, changes you in ways that aren't obvious at first. Most people look at an older man and they see a slow decline. But that's not what's happening at all. What's actually happening is a complete restructuring of what power means to you. When you were younger, power looked like money, status, physical strength, the ability to win arguments and prove people wrong. That was the game. And you probably spent decades playing it, getting pretty good at it too.
And Gen X, we never really played that game. We really didn't care about that game. We were just like, okay, like our total childhood, teenage, young adult years, it was all about being useful, doing what it took to get the job done. Not about arguing whether or not the job needed to get done. Just you were there to get the job done, so you did the job.
But somewhere in your 50s, the rules changed. Or maybe you finally understood that you'd been playing by the wrong rules the entire time. Think about the people in your life who have shaped you the most. Not the ones who talked the loudest or showed off the most. It's the people who were quietly capable, the ones who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. They just existed in their own authority. That person at work who never raised his voice but somehow got the respect of everyone in the room. Or the older relative who didn't give advice unless you asked, but when he did speak, people listened. That's what you're becoming. And it terrifies people who still believe that power is about domination. Here's something that catches a lot of men off guard in their 50s. You suddenly realize that you no longer have time for certain conversations. You don't have patience for drama the way you used to. You won't engage in arguments with people just to prove you're right.
No, we just did the work. It was basically, like a term that I learned recently from watching a lot of JTF2 videos is an old Latin term called acta non verba, actions, not words. And we were the ones who just, went out and did things. We didn't talk about things, we just did them.
And people can feel that shift. They can sense that you've changed the rules of the game. You're not playing anymore. And when someone realizes they can't pull you into their world, that they can't make you react the way they used to, they call it cold. They call it distant, but what it really is freedom. The emotional discipline that comes with age isn't something you're born with. It's something you earn. Every time you've had to swallow anger and keep working. Every time you've had to stay calm when someone was trying to get under your skin. Every time you've chosen not to say something you were thinking, you were building something. You were
And, not saying something that you were thinking, that ignited our sarcasm. Like, when it come to any one of the generations, sarcasm was a Gen X thing. It was just total, like, that's how we dealt with stuff. We just made, sarcastic, inappropriate, snide comments, and then moved on with our day.
building the ability to stay centered in the middle of chaos. Most men in their 20s think that's weakness. Most men in their 50s know it's the foundation of everything they've built that lasted. And here's what's interesting about this kind of power. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't even need to be seen. You can have mastered the art of staying calm in any situation, and nobody needs to know it. You can have developed the discipline to walk away from situations that aren't serving you, and you don't need anyone to applaud you for it. That
Yeah, and that's why you can see when, or that's why when you see a crisis situation, the people that are the calmest, generally they're Gen X. Generally, they're the people that have said, that are saying, while the crisis is going on, going, yeah, I've seen this before. I've seen worse. This doesn't surprise me at all. And then just becomes the leader of the person or the group that fixes the problem.
That's what separates real confidence from the false confidence of younger men. False confidence needs to be noticed. Real confidence just exists. By the time you hit 50, you've probably figured out something else too. You've figured out that you can't control what other people do. You can't control if they're honest with you or if they're lying. You can't control if they respect you or if they disrespect you.
The only thing you really can control is how it affects you. And once you realize that, you start getting this, element of calmness that just kind of, oh, well, looks like they're just going to keep on arguing.
The only thing you can control is how much of your energy you give them. And that's a liberating discovery. It means you stop wasting your life trying to convince people who don't want to be convinced. You stop trying to prove yourself to people who have already made up their minds. You just let them go, and they hate it. There's a freedom in being underestimated. People see your age and they think they know what you're capable of. They see the gray hair and the slower movements and they assume you're declining. They don't realize you're still learning. You're still sharp. In fact, you might be sharper than you've ever been because you're not clouded by desperation anymore.
And the thing about Gen X is Gen X people had to learn on the fly and learn in real time. And, when it came to, every decision had a consequence to it. We learned that. And we learned how to calculate risk versus reward so fast that, it looks like, we're not doing anything, but we're analyzing the situation and we're calculating how we're actually going to either A, respond to it, or B, fix the problem. That's the two main components of the people from Gen X. We had to fix our own problems all the way through our entire lives.
You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not trying to win the approval of people who don't matter. So you see things clearly. You spot bullshit from a mile away. You understand people's motivations because you've seen the same patterns repeated 1,000 times. And that clarity is actually dangerous in the way that knowledge is dangerous. The world tries to tell you that your value is tied to your productivity, that once you can't produce the way you used to, you're fatting away. And if you bought into that message, you might spend your 50s feeling like you're becoming irrelevant. But there's another way to look at it. Maybe your value was never about what you could produce. Maybe it was always about who you are, and who you are becomes increasingly clear the longer you live.
Yeah, and who you are is your most valuable asset. How you respond to things, how you react, how you deal with adversity, and how you deal with triumph. That shapes who you are. And he's got this right down on the mat, ready for the 1, 2, 3. He's got this pinned down so well it isn't funny.
The noise falls away. The pretending stops. What's left is real. You've probably noticed that younger people can't seem to handle silence the way you can. A conversation gets uncomfortable and they immediately try to fill the space. They need to say something. They need to resolve the tension. But you've learned that tension is sometimes just part of the conversation. You can sit with it. You can let the other person feel uncomfortable if they need to. And that's powerful in a way that's almost unsettling to people who have never experienced it.
Yeah, and to make the other person stew with the anger they're bringing to the conversation while you're just sitting there like, oh, well, whatever. That basically gives you the power in the conversation. That gives you the better position in a negotiation, is to not show emotion. And through the 70s and 80s, Gen X, they really didn't have to show emotion. They were told to bury that stuff.
There's no arguing with you, not really. You've already heard all the arguments. You've already made your mistakes. You've already paid your dues. What's someone going to say that's going to change your mind at this point? Nothing, probably. And everyone can sense that. This is where the real shift happens. In your 50s, you stop believing that you need to fix everything. You stop thinking that it's your job to manage other people's emotions or make them happy. You've realized that some people don't want to be happy. They want to be right. They want to be the victim, and that's their choice. You can respect it without participating in it. You can love someone without enabling their dysfunction. You can care about someone without letting them destroy you. That's maturity. And it feels like rejection to people who have spent their whole lives expecting you to sacrifice yourself for them.
Yeah, and when he's talking about uh, people who are looking for approval of either like being sad or happy or whatever like that, Gen X don't do that. We just don't do that. We do that in silence. Like, well, yeah, okay, we're happy that you're happy, but whatever. Let's move on with our day, kind of thing.
The financial wisdom that comes with age is something they don't advertise. By your 50s, you've probably blown money on things that don't matter. You've probably realized that status symbols are just ways for other people to control you. You don't need the newest car to feel good about yourself. You don't need to stay in a job you hate to prove something to people you don't actually like.
Yeah, and when it comes to the car, Gen Xers are still in love with the muscle cars that we grew up with. Like, those were that brings us back to our childhood. That brings us back to our youth. That makes us feel young. Why do you think most Gen Xers still have a muscle car from the past, or some sort of item that they can say, well, this is what we used to use, or this is what we used to play with. Gen Xers have nostalgia somewhere near them, something to bring them back to their youth and just kind of get them back to that peace.
You figured out that money is freedom, and you're willing to spend less and live differently if it means you're not trapped anymore. That shift in perspective changes everything. You stop being desperate, and desperate men are easy to manipulate. Men who have learned that they can live on less are almost impossible to control. There's a peace that comes from not needing anything from anyone, not because you're cold or indifferent, but because you've learned to meet your own needs. You've learned that being dependent on someone else's validation makes you vulnerable in a way that's almost painful once you understand it.
Yeah, if you have your needs met, like I mean, like groceries in the cupboards, bills paid, a house or a shelter that keeps the weather away. Once you have those three things taken care of, everything else is just wants. And Gen X just wants to be left alone. And that doesn't cost any money.
So you stopped doing it. You stopped asking for permission to be yourself. You stopped waiting for someone else to make you feel worthy. And when you stop doing those things, you become stable in a way that confuses people. They can't shake you because you're not looking to them for stability. You've built your own foundation. Think about how it feels when someone's desperation shows. It comes through in everything they do. The way they talk, the way they try too hard to be liked, the way they get upset when people don't respond the way they wanted. You can see it from a mile away now. And part of you probably feels some compassion for it because you remember being that guy.
Like, have you ever seen somebody like get so jealous that another person that they know got a nice brand new car? And all of a sudden, next thing you know, they went out and they just completely blew the budget and maxed themselves out to buy an even better car. That social validation that doesn't exist in Gen X. We don't care what people think about us. We just don't want people to concentrate on our what we're doing. Leave us alone. Just let us be, and we'll be happy for it. You guys have your own little quarrels and qualms and stuff like that. You guys take care of that yourself. We'll step back for a little while.
But you also know that desperation is a trap. It keeps you small, so you don't do it anymore. And people sense that. They sense that they can't hurt you because you're not hanging your whole life on what they think of you. There's something about having survived real hardship that changes your face. It's not just physical. It's something in the eyes. People can see that you've been through something and you came out the other side. It's the same thing you see in soldiers or firefighters or anyone who's had to face actual danger and kept going.
Yeah, and interesting fact that on 9/11, most of the rescue workers, the firefighters, the ambulatory people, the police officers, most of the people that took care of that situation in New York, most of those people were Gen X, and they were the ones running into the flames to try and save the people. It wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot of, Gen Zs or millennials. There wasn't a whole lot of uh, boomers that went in. It was mainly and mostly Gen X that went into those flames.
You develop a kind of quiet authority that no amount of money or status can buy. And younger men, especially the ones who have had easy lives, they respond to that. They sense that you know something they don't. They sense that you've been tested and you passed. And that's attractive, not in a sexual way, but in a human way. People want to be around people who are genuinely capable and calm. It makes them feel safer. The confidence that comes from knowing that you failed and survived the failure is different from any other confidence. You failed at something that mattered to you. You were humiliated by it. You had to live with the consequences, and you're still here. That knowledge cannot be faked. Younger people spend their whole lives trying to avoid failure. They're terrified of it. But you've lived through it and learned that it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. When we were growing up, and I hate to keep coming back to the idea of, when we were growing up, but that's how we learned about failure and, compromise and consequence and losing. is because everything was about winning and losing. There wasn't a participation award for just because you were involved in the event. If you didn't perform, you didn't get what you were looking for. And that built performance over participation as a mindset for Gen X. Is we were told that if you didn't perform well, you didn't get anything in return. So we did everything that we possibly could within ourselves to actually go out and make that performance so that we did get the recognition. We did get the first place trophy. We did get the accolades for, performing well. Now, all you got to do is just show up and say, I was there. I got my participation ribbon. We didn't get participation ribbons. You didn't get a ribbon unless you were first, second, or third. Period.
You learned that you're more resilient than you thought. And that understanding makes you completely different in a way that shows up in everything you do. By your 50s, you've probably developed the ability to have a conversation without trying to win it. You don't need to make your point. You don't need to prove that you're smart or right. You can just listen to what someone's saying and understand it without needing to immediately prove them wrong or show them how they're mistaken.
Or just make a snide, sarcastic comment and move on with your day. That's mostly what we did most of the time.
That's rare. Most people are so busy waiting for their turn to talk that they never actually hear what the other person is saying. You've learned to just listen. And there's something almost disturbing about that to people who are used to verbal sparring. They expect you to come back at them, and you don't. You just acknowledge what they said. And somehow, that's more powerful than any argument you could make.
In an argument, if you show any type of emotion, you've already lost. Because now all of a sudden, you're putting your entire being on the line for an argument about something that may or may not be really all that important. Like, it could be, something as simple or stupid as, whether or not you start your laces on your shoes from the left or the right. And some people will actually argue about it. Some people will actually argue about whether or not the toilet paper goes over and hangs off the front or behind and hangs off the back. Some people will actually make an emotional argument about one way or the other. And as far as the Gen X crew, most of us are like, as long as it's not going to fall off when I tear off a sheet, I don't care.
The boundaries you've set by this point in your life aren't just rules. They're the result of hard-earned experience. You've let people treat you badly, and you know what that costs. You've said yes when you should have said no, and you know what that leads to. You've given your loyalty to people who didn't earn it, and you know exactly how much that hurts. So the boundaries you have now aren't mean or defensive. They're protective. They're based on evidence. They're based on what you've learned about how the world actually works.
Yeah, and they're based on the consequences that we've received from those decisions and actions. And, when it comes down to it, our whole life was based around consequence. We may as well just been called the consequence generation.
And when you maintain those boundaries calmly and consistently, people eventually stop testing them. They learn that you mean what you say. Here's something that probably surprises younger people about you. You don't need anyone to know how much you've accomplished or overcome. You don't need a platform to tell your story or get validation for what you've done. You just live your life and let the results speak for themselves. That indifference to other people's opinions is what they sense when they're around you. And it makes them slightly uncomfortable because they're still trapped in the world of perception and approval.
Yeah, we don't have rooms of trophies of things that, of things that we've done and things that we've accomplished in our lives. We just have a mental file folder about, those things. And when you see a Gen X person just kind of chilling out, chances are they're going through that file folder and, remembering some of the things that they've done that were similar, and how things have evolved and have had to change. We've had to adapt to the way things are going. So this way here, it almost looks like we are able to see into the future. We're just preparing ourselves on how fastly things are going to be changing.
But you've learned that approval from strangers is worthless. The only approval that matters is your own, and you've worked hard enough for long enough that you've actually earned it. The wisdom that comes with age isn't just information, it's pattern recognition. You've seen how people operate. You've seen the same stories repeat over and over. You've watched what works and what doesn't. And you don't need to explain it to anyone because you're not trying to convince them of anything. You just know. And when people ask you for advice, you give it, but you're not attached to whether they take it or not.
Yeah, and when it comes to, the self-worth, like, we know what we're worth. We know we have the self-worth. We don't broadcast it. We don't need other people to know what we feel we're worth. We know ourselves. And I believe that's where a lot of, the whole Gen X being the most dangerous is because nobody else knows how we value ourselves. Nobody else knows. None of the other generations see on their screens how Gen X has achieved so many different things. We didn't document that stuff. We just file foldered it in our mind and let that be our own category of how well we've actually put value on ourselves.
You've learned that people have to figure things out for themselves. And that acceptance of other people's autonomy, that respect for their right to make their own mistakes, that's also a kind of power that most people don't recognize. The physical changes that come with age don't diminish you the way the culture tries to tell you they do. Yes, you move differently. You recover more slowly. You feel things in your body that you never felt before, but you also move with intention. You don't waste energy on things that don't matter. You don't feel the need to prove anything with your body anymore. And that shifts something fundamental in how you carry yourself. You're not trying anymore. And trying is exhausting. Not trying is peaceful. And there's a physical confidence that comes from that peace that's completely different from the physical confidence of youth. By now, you've probably figured out that most of what you were taught to want doesn't actually make you happy. The money, the status, the body, the image. None of it works the way you thought it would. And that realization is both disappointing and liberating.
And it's also a pattern that has happened throughout our entire lives. Governments have always been telling you that they're going to do something and they never do it. Authority figures have always said that they're going to be taking care of things, but they don't. And no matter how many times we went through our lives or how many things we went through in our lives, we always found one common value was disappointment. Disappointment ran through our entire life, right from childhood, right to adulthood, right into the Middle Ages. We've seen it. That's why we don't look very bothered by when something doesn't happen, when somebody says they're going to do something and they just don't do it. We know. We're just waiting to make the jokes about it.
Disappointing because you spent so many years chasing it, but liberating because now you can stop. Now you can figure out what actually matters to you, separate from what you were told should matter. And that clarity of intention is dangerous to systems that depend on your confusion. The respect that you have now is earned, not given. Nobody has to like you. Nobody has to approve of you. But the people who know you, who have seen how you handle yourself, who have watched you keep your word and face your challenges, they respect you. And that respect is deep in a way that admiration never is. People admire celebrities and performers, but they respect people who are genuinely themselves. And by your 50s, you've probably stopped pretending hard enough that people can actually see who you are. And that's what they respect. There's a subtle power in knowing that you've already lived a life that many people never will. You've experienced love and loss. You've had responsibility. You've failed and kept going. You've been betrayed and forgiven. You've worked and built and watched things fall apart and rebuilt them. You've seen decades pass. You've watched people change and grow and sometimes stay stuck. You've learned what you're capable of, and all of that is just built into you now.
Yeah, and capability is, our entire life bottling up to this point in our life. We learn how to do things. We learn, if our bike chain ever fell off, we just flipped the bike over, put the chain back on, and went on about our ride. If we got cut or bruised or whatever like that, jumping over the ramps that we made, we fixed ourselves up. We determined whether or not it was, just a scratch and walk it off, bleeding and need to go get some first aid at home, or whether or not we need to actually go to the 911 and go to the hospital. We learned all those things. We were capable of making our own decisions, dealing with our own consequences, and then moving on to make more decisions later on.
It's in the way you walk, the way you listen, the way you respond to crisis or change or disappointment. And younger people sense it. They sense that you've already been through things that they're still afraid of. The truth about what makes men more dangerous after 50 has nothing to do with aggression and everything to do with freedom. You're dangerous because you're not desperate anymore. You're dangerous because you can say no without giving a reason. You're dangerous because you've learned to be alone and you're completely okay with it. You're dangerous because you're willing to walk away from money, from relationships, from jobs, from anything that's asking you to betray yourself. You're dangerous because you can see through manipulation and you won't participate in it. You're dangerous because you've lost enough that you're not afraid of losing anymore. You're dangerous because you know that the only person's approval you actually need is your own. You're dangerous because you've learned that real power isn't about dominating other people. It's about dominating yourself. The years ahead aren't about decline. They're about clarity. They're about becoming more fully yourself with each passing year. They're about watching the people around you scramble for things that you've already figured out don't matter. They're about the quiet satisfaction of knowing who you are and being completely at peace with it. The things that used to bother you, they don't touch you anymore. The games that used to fascinate you, they're obvious now. The people who don't serve you, you can release them without guilt. The life you want to live, you can finally live it because you're no longer bound by other people's expectations.
We never sought other people's expectations. We never sought other people's approval. We just did what we did. And, if another person didn't approve of it, then we just dealt with the consequence and moved on. We knew life was going to be full of consequences right out of the gate. Like, we were self-reliant, like to the point where by the time you were like 12 or 13, sometimes 8, 9, 10 years old, some kids had a key to their house on a shoelace so they could let themselves in after school because there was nobody home. Try getting away with that nowadays. No, 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 no. It was, that's why they called us the latchkey generation. We had a latchkey around our neck. Or, in my case, I had a set of keys in my pocket. And we just dealt with things on our own until our parents came home, made sure our homework was done by the time they came home, and then we could go out and just disappear for, till the street lights came on.
Or your own old limitations. You're becoming the man that younger men hope they grow up to be. The man who's comfortable in his own skin. The man who doesn't need anything from anyone and therefore can't be controlled. The man who's so at peace with himself that his mere presence calms other people down. The man who speaks from experience and doesn't need to prove anything because everything he says carries the weight of real life. You're becoming dangerous in the best possible way. Not as a threat, but as an example of what's actually possible when a man stops performing and starts living. That's what you're becoming. And somewhere deep down, everyone who meets you can feel it. This is your time, not the time of your decline, the time of your actual power, the time when everything you've learned finally gets to be worth something, the time when you get to say no to anything that doesn't serve your peace, the time when you get to build exactly the life you want without asking for permission, the time when your quiet confidence speaks louder than anyone shouting.
And that's the one thing that they failed to mention is Gen X are deemed dangerous because their self-confidence, their confidence in themselves to be able to not only deal with situations, fix situations, and just kind of handle emotionally handle the situation at hand. We're calm under pressure. We don't, you know, we don't go running around in the opposite direction of a tornado trying to stop it. We just deal with the situation. We just hang on tight, wait till it's over, and then we fix what can be fixed. That's a quiet confidence that we have within ourselves. That we don't need anybody else's validation. We can validate ourselves.
The time when you're finally free from the tyranny of other people's approval. And that freedom, that genuine, hard-earned freedom, is what they sense when they're around you. And yes, in their own confused way, they find it dangerous. But you know the truth. It's not dangerous. It's just peace. It's just self-respect. It's just a man who's finally figured out who he is and decided that's more than enough.
Alrighty, final thoughts. I really like that channel, Psychology Unlocked. It really gives you a deep dive into, you know, the inner thoughts and inner twining of the situation you're looking at to understand, and it gives you a better understanding of all the things that shape what's going on for that situation. I'll leave a link in the description box with your channel and a link to that video. So this way here you can go check it out yourselves. But yeah, like, people look at Gen Xers, some people look at Gen Xers, and they immediately have a feeling of intimidation. And intimidation is a form of fear of danger. And when it comes down to it, I've been told many times I am one intimidating person because I have the ability to just remain calm under like crisis. I have the ability to fix pretty much anything that's going on. And I have the experience of, dealing with all this kind of stuff my entire life. And, I have a confidence about myself that, hey, a lot of people find unnerving. But it's just, that self-confidence about being able to just handle things. That's why a lot of people consider Gen X people, over 50. Most of us are over 50 right now, but Gen X people as dangerous people. It's not because we're going to go beat people up or violent or anything like that, because you just don't know. And when you don't know something, a lot of the times you're afraid of those unknowns, the fear of the unknown, and that makes something dangerous. So let's have a conversation in the comment section below. What you think of this what do you think of this video, and what you think of? Do you know anybody who has that quiet confidence of themselves that makes them seem kind of, it's a little weird, but that you're kind of afraid to go up and ask the simple question. Let's have a conversation in the comment section below. A link to the video will be in the description box along with the channel link, so that you guys can check out some more stuff from that channel. This is more of a promotion than a reaction kind of a channel anyway. So I like to promote things that I think are valuable, not just to me, but to my viewers. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because we love having new people join our community of friends who just like everything entertaining. So until we get to the next one, my friends, I wish you all peace, love, and happiness, and safety.
Until we meet again, check out my other video or my playlist of videos.